And good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar of today. I'm very excited to be bringing you one of our most favorite programs to Porto, Portugal, the Douro Valley, and the Azores that we're going to run twice next year in the spring and in the fall. Thanks, everyone, for joining me and to find out all about this amazing trip. We're going to get started in about a minute's time at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those of you who have joined us already, just bear with me as we get started. All of this webinar will be conducted as usual with me doing all the talking. But of course, I welcome any questions, comments that you might have about any part of the program. You can make comments in either the chat box or the Q&A box. If you see that, it'll be in a menu bar either at the top or the bottom of your screen. You might have to scroll around with your mouse to see that. And that's where you can type any questions, and I will answer them at the Q&A session, which will be at the end of the webinar. So thanks again for indulging me with that. And we, as I say, are going to get started. It's 11 o'clock. There we go. I signed on a little bit late today. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Once again, today's webinar is all about our trip to Porto, Douro, and the Azores, happening in April and September of next year. This is actually a combination of two itineraries which we had offered separately, but what we found was that 90% of our members decided to do both anyway. So we just thought, okay, well, let's wrap them into one because it's just logistically easier both for both you and for us to operate it as one trip. So that's what's happening, and thank you for that. Yeah, I just got a comment here from Ingrid, who participated in our program last year, who's joined us to see if there's any changes. Ingrid, I can assure you there's not really any substantial changes, but nevertheless, follow along, and thanks for joining us. And so excited that some love to follow along on our webinars on a regular basis. So let me say a few words about Wheel and Anchor for our new members. And I do see a few names on the list here that I do not recognize. So welcome, and thanks for being part of our community. We are all about bringing travelers together. That's our motto. You see it on our all of our e-brochures and on our website and all the rest of it. What does that mean? Well, I've been organizing trips for Canadians to all parts of the world for the better part of 34 years this year, and during all that time, what really became apparent to me and what resonated me was the fact that when you have people who know each other, who have some connection to one another, even if it is more, how should we say, you don't necessarily have to be friends, but at least you have a certain common understanding. We say like-mindedness. What does that mean? Well, we sort of look at how we travel the world, how we act as tourists. At the end of the day, we're all tourists. Sometimes we don't like to think that we're tourists, but we are tourists. The moment that we travel away from home and visit a place for leisure purposes, we're tourists. And so, most of our members have obviously traveled extensively before, and we all know what it's like when we see, other tourists, and we immediately have our judgments and assessments about them, and I like to think that we think that we're a little bit better than they are, or maybe we're a little bit more polite, or we're a little bit more inquisitive. And whatever that dynamic is, it is very apparent as Canadians, with most of us, who we are as people out visiting parts of the world. And it's this essence that is what brings us together, and is why we started this community as a community, as opposed to just running tours for anonymous people. And part of that is this idea of becoming connected, because when you have an experience with people that you have something in common with, you have a certain something resonates with your fellow travel members. First of all, the trip itself, Kara, has so much more meaning and it has so much more depth, and you have a lot more fun. A big part of travel is having fun along the way, and of course, if you are with like-minded people, you're far more likely to have a bunch of laughs. Go for drinks after a day of travel, or at any point in time, and that I think is the essence of what Wheel and Anchor is all about. And when you do all of that, you also become well-traveled, because well-traveled is not just about the number of places you've been, but it's the quality of the experience that you've had along the way. And that's all sort of baked into the concept behind our trips, how we travel, the pace that we travel. Anyway, there's lots I could talk about that goes into the ethos of Wheel and Anchor. But if you follow us, or if you have been following us, reading our newsletters that come every week, you will have a sense of all that. Oops, we jumped ahead, I think. Oh, no, we didn't jump ahead. In order to accomplish all of this, we have an amazing team of professionals that have joined me over the last number of years since we started Wheel and Anchor back in 2018. And so, by way of brief introduction to at least two, I'm not going to introduce everybody, but I'll start with myself. My name is Gordon. I am the founder of Wheel and Anchor. And as I say, I've been doing this. I've been organizing travel for 34 years. Travel is my passion. I'm always on the road. I just traveled from Central Asia to here in South Africa today, a 32-hour journey with layovers, but I love it. I love every moment of it. And I say, this is what I do. I travel to create, to find, to discover, and share great experiences for our members. And the other important person for the purposes of our webinar today is Paula Zarnick, who is our lead trip specialist, who is the one who is most likely to pick up the phone when you call in to find out about one of our trips, and will answer all your questions and share the excitement of participating in a Wheel and Anchor trip. Is that right, Paula?
It is, yes, definitely.
Good. And as I say, there's a whole bunch more team members, a few photos down below that make this all possible. Yeah, I say we're a great, dynamic, and fun team of people. So our plan today, as is typical with our webinars, is we are going to take you on a digital journey around Portugal, specifically, of course, Porto and the Douro Valley, followed by the Azores, and then yeah, I'm going to. It says here in April, but of course it's April and September. So we're going to cover the itinerary for both seasons is the same, because this is now a tried and true itinerary. We've run this a number of times. We always make little tweaks along the way. And as one of our members, Ingrid, who's joined us, is checking for what we've done differently, but we've kept all the best parts, and anything that was we could do better, we do better. A couple of quick photos from our members on this most recent trip that went in April of this year. They just returned. I was reading through some of the feedback, and by and large, people had a really wonderful time. Our trips, of course, are all hosted. Here in this particular case is our host, Michelle, who you see in the back corner, a delightful, energetic person who really goes to great lengths to make sure that everybody has a great time. Of course, all of our trips have a different host every time, so it's not necessarily Michelle that will do Porto and the Azores next year. It might be, but whoever, we have some great hosts. And as I say, you can see from some of the smiles along the way, you get a sense of the dynamic that we look to create on all of our trips. So let's do the geography lesson at the outset and talk about this program. We're going to begin. The first half of the program is in Porto, which again, if you look at the inset map up in the top right here, you'll see Portugal, which of course is on the western coast of the Iberian Peninsula, and Porto and the Douro Valley are up here in the north. And so the Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, is down here in the center, and the Algarve, that some of you may be familiar with along the South Mediterranean, sorry, the South Atlantic coast of Portugal is down here. And the Azores are way over here in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, they're a third of the way back to North America. And so it makes them a very unique and interesting place to visit, because this is an autonomous region of Portugal. They are self-governed. They're, of course, part of Portugal. Everybody carries a Portuguese passport, but they make a lot of the decisions about about society there on the islands. And so for the first week in Porto, we'll be based in the city for 5 nights. We'll visit a couple of the other interesting cities that not a lot of travelers from North America get to visit, but are highly worth it. We visit Braga, the religious capital of Portugal, as well as Guimarães, which is a UNESCO site. Two smaller cities in the northern part of Portugal that are very interesting and very much worth visiting. And then we spend a few nights up in the Douro Valley, in this fabled section of the river where you have all of these terraced vineyards. Then we head back to Porto in order to do the second leg of the trip, which is out here on the island of São Miguel, the principal island of the Azores. This is where most of the action happens. There's, of course, a whole archipelago of islands in the Azores. A lot of the other ones are quite quiet. But São Miguel kind of offers everything, including some of the best scenery, the whale and dolphin watching, a number of other great things to see and do that we're going to talk about in a second. So let's go into the day by day, and I'll give you a little bit of a taste of what you can expect on this trip, which starts, of course, as I mentioned, with Porto. And Porto is a relatively easy city to get to, depending on how you fly. There's different options. And of course, depending on where you live in Canada, you may fly via Toronto, or you may be able to fly directly to another gateway city in Europe. I know some of our members flew in through London, if you're coming from the West Coast, and then down to Porto. But I would say most of our members will fly on SATA Airlines, the airline of the Azores. It's also called Azores Airlines, because they have a nonstop service between Toronto and Ponta Delgada, the capital of São Miguel, the principal island of the Azores. So that just makes it a lot easier from coming home, because otherwise you have to go back to the mainland, which, as I mentioned, the Azores is about a third of the way across the Atlantic from between Europe and North America. So talking about Porto, Porto is the second largest city in Portugal, up in the north. Obviously, its claim to fame, if you will, are the port wines that are produced there, all along the side of the river. Actually, they're produced on this side of the river. If you're looking past the bridge here, is where the big famous labels that you can all recognize from the liquor store at home, particularly those of you who are aficionados of port wine. But there's a lot more to see and do in Porto. It has actually become the food capital, I think, of Portugal, and if not of southwestern Europe. And there are so many incredible restaurants in Porto, and we're going to get a sampling of just a couple of those for the time that we're there. But on your first day, we never plan too much after arrival, because of course it's a long journey. We'll have an icebreaker so that our community people can get to know each other and sort of start to make friends and make plans for that time that you have at leisure to explore some of this city on your own. Then we will strike out on the first full day in Portugal, in Porto, I should say, to see some of the highlights. So we're staying at the hotel that we've typically stayed at for the last couple of years, the Porto Bay, which is well situated right in the heart of things. You're a stone's throw from the Mercado Bolao, which is one of the famous markets of Porto. We're also very close by the Dos Clérigos Church, which is only a few steps away. The Lello Library, I'll tell you about in a moment, and as well as the São Bento railway station. Porto is, of course, where a lot of the tiles are produced in Portugal. And so you'll see a lot of that tile work adorning many of the buildings. And we're going to tour around on this first day, seeing some of those things, and learning about the history of the tile making. Again, particularly looking up on the wall of the São Bento railway station. It's one of my favorite spots, because it's such an incredible piece of art that's been created in the railway station. We will spend the morning touring around, going on foot mostly. Porto is a city that is best explored on foot, so this is definitely a walking-oriented trip. And because it is at the mouth of the Douro River, it's on the section of the river just before it empties into the Atlantic Ocean. It's a lot of the city is high up on the banks of the river, so it's a lot of up and down. So you need to be prepared for that on this trip. So you need to make sure that the walking legs are in good shape, because no matter what, there's hardly a flat street in in Porto as a result of that. In the afternoon, we head to the south side of the river. So we are staying on the north side of the Douro River. That is where the sort of the downtown is, and we'll cross over the famous Louis I Bridge. That's actually the one that was pictured in one of the first slides. And we will head to an area called Vila Nova de Gaia, which is the area of Porto where port wine is produced up till today and has been for a long time. You're going to hear all about that of course, when you're there. But when you look at the names of the famous producers of port wine, Taylor Fladgate, and I'm not a huge port wine person myself, but all of those famous brands, you'll see that they're all English names. And so there's a whole interesting history as to why the port wine producers are all British. And that's because the British were the ones that actually originally sort of came up with the idea of port wine to begin with. And so that whole history is part of what we will learn about on our first day in Portugal. We're then going to make a trip out of town up to the north. As I mentioned, we're going to visit two small cities, the first of which will be Braga, which during Roman times was actually the Catholic, one of the major Catholic cities in all of Europe, and certainly in the Iberian Peninsula. And so they have some incredible landmarks like the Bom Jesus Sanctuary, the Cathedral of Braga itself. You get a sense of it here. It's a beautiful, beautiful city, incredible sacred sites. And you don't have to necessarily have that much of an interest in Catholic religion per se, but the artistry, the architecture of all these sites is really, really quite amazing. We'll have a delicious lunch there. As those of you who've participated in our trips will know, we try to put effort into making sure that you have some terrific culinary experiences all throughout the trip. And you'll have some free time to enjoy Braga before we head back to Porto. And the nice thing is it's not all that far away. I think it's a little bit about an hour's drive outside of Porto. So no big long travel days. As with all of our trips, we have free time, in fact, a whole free day in Porto, and there are so many things that we simply couldn't or wouldn't want to include in a sightseeing tour, because otherwise it tends to get boring, because some people like museums and other people like to explore more of the churches and the architecture, and other people like to just sit and relax and have a coffee and watch and people watch, as it were. But there's many different things to see, and I encourage, particularly if you're thinking about is this the kind of trip that I want to go on? Do a little bit of Googling. What is there to do in Porto? Because you'll find a whole list of best things, as it were. And some of those, one of the things that's most often mentioned, and I talked about it a few minutes ago, the Livraria Lello, which is an incredibly ornate library that was actually the inspiration for the Harry Potter films, or at least for the library in the Harry Potter films. It's a very popular spot. It's just around the corner from where the hotel is located. You have to kind of go in and get a ticket in advance, because there tends to be a long line to go into this very funky library. Is almost a rite of passage for visitors to Porto. But there's also some beautiful gardens and parks that you can visit. There's the cemetery of the Prado Repuso, which is kind of a hidden gem of the city. But as I say, just wandering the cobblestone streets up and down, your legs will get tired if you wander around for the whole day. But there's so much to enjoy in this rather amazing city. We'll then head out for one more day, again, to one of the smaller cities outside, Guimarães. And again, I'm probably pronouncing them wrong. I'm pretty good at pronouncing cities in a lot of languages, but Portuguese is one of those ones that I find a little bit challenging. This city dates back to the 10th century, and there is a UNESCO component of the city that comprises the historical center, where you'll find most of the medieval buildings and churches. It is there is a 16th century palace where the Portuguese kings once lived, and this is considered to be the birthplace of Portugal. So you'll hear and learn from the local guides a lot about the origins of Portugal and how it sort of all started with Guimaras. Once again, you'll get to taste some local pastries like tocino de choy, which is a local, a very special local pastry. Many of you will know the pastéis de nata, the little egg tart that Portugal is so famous for, and you'll find it, of course, all over the country. And you know, I call them little calorie bombs, but they're certainly worth it. And all along, you'll be tasting the wines as well of the northern parts of Portugal. So I should have put onto the picture here. So there's Guimaras, the cradle of Portugal, and beautiful green cities, all very hilly. The northern part of Portugal is characterized by this very hilly landscape. There's a lot of wonderful river valleys, and the most notable of which, of course, is the Douro River itself, where we'll be headed the next day. We'll take a drive, a very picturesque drive out, not always along the Douro, but along different landscapes leading to the area that's a couple of hours drive, where we will hang out for the next 3 nights on the bank of the river at a wonderful hotel again that we have forged a bit of a relationship with. We've worked with these guys. We've had our guests stay there for the last couple of years, and people really enjoy it. And this is a good time to point out why I think this trip is a better alternative to visiting this region of Portugal, because, you know, a lot of people often come to us and say, well, you know, I was thinking about doing a Douro river cruise, which is certainly an option. But, you know, the river cruises, the stretch of the river that you can actually cruise on the Douro is quite short. And the section of it that is most interesting is this section here, where we're staying with the terraced vineyards. And so that's what people come to do and to see. But of course, when you're here staying at a local hotel and visiting the vineyards, and you're enjoying all of your meals in the local culture, you're not eating anything on a ship. And I think that this represents a better way to see this part of Portugal. So, as I say, we're gonna drive up from Porto through this amazing landscape. We'll stop at a lovely winery and have a wine tasting lunch by the family, and we'll already get a taste of the wine. Some of you may have already had Douro wines before. You know that they are among the most celebrated in all of Portugal, and you get a little bit more educated about them. And I find that when members come on a trip like this, they really learn something new, because, you know, we tend to grab for the wines from the countries that we're, more familiar with, whether it's France or Italy or Spain, and Portugal is usually further down the list, but you'll come away with a new appreciation of Portuguese wines in this region of the Douro. We're going to have a day to kind of relax and enjoy the countryside. We will have a lovely Portuguese lunch at a historic restaurant in the valley, but there's some amazing views. There's some walks around that you can do, and you'll have time to really just enjoy the atmosphere of the hotel and the environs, because again, it is such a beautiful part of the countryside, and relaxing and just sort of being a part of it is what makes this trip again a very popular one amongst the ones that we do in Portugal. The next day, we're going to go in a little bit more depth to understand about the history of the viticulture in the region of the Douro Valley. We're also going to take a river cruise, about a 1-hour cruise, and this will give you the same perspective as you would have otherwise from that aforementioned river cruise, because most of the highlights that you can see are along this stretch of the Douro River. So that'll be a highlight for sure. And then we'll once again visit a family farm and have yet again another wine pairing lunch at a family-owned winery that will give you a wonderful sense of this beautiful region. So final day, we'll head back to Porto and head straight to the airport and hop on our flight over to the Azores for the second half of our trip, which will begin at Ponta Delgada, the capital of this small island of São Miguel. The Azores does not have a huge population. I think the total population of the whole island of São Miguel is about 150,000 people. So it's quite a low density population, and the landscapes here are breathtaking. And this is the one thing that I always think about with the Azores. I've been fortunate to go a few times myself, is that there's a photo stop like literally at every corner. So once we arrive in, we're going to make our way to the east side of the island, to the town of Furnas, which is actually located in the crater of a volcano. The Azores, as you can imagine, are a volcanic archipelago, and we will see the calderas in different parts of the island, and some of them are more pronounced than others. But Furnas is actually where you still have this active geothermal activity that is most evidenced by the sort of the geysers and the hot springs that are all around the basin of the volcano. We're going to check into our hotel in Furnas, which is called the Terra Nostra Garden Hotel. Once again, we've been consistently coming back to this top-rated hotel. That's always a favorite among our members. The thing that is most interesting about the hotel is that it sits on an estate that includes a huge heated pond. Well, it's almost like a small lake that is filled with thermal water, and so that lake is open to the public during daytime hours, but first thing in the morning until I think about 9, and in the evening after 6 p.m., it is exclusively for hotel guests. And again, this is a really favored thing to do, particularly after a day of touring, to come back to the hotel and then be able to go into this huge pond with thermal water and just relax and have it practically all to yourself, just the other hotel guests. So it's a really, really lovely spot. They've got very contemporary modern rooms, very cozy place to stay and enjoy the first few days, where we can explore the whole eastern side of the island. In Furnas, you've got a number of activities, and we'll head out to explore the lake of Furnas, which is a very picturesque lake. And all around the lake, there are actually various hot springs that we can take a look at, the Calderos do Lago de Furnas. And we'll also try the traditional dish here, which is called cozido. And cozido is prepared by putting a pot of meat and potatoes and some vegetables and sinking it into the ground, which is heated by the geothermal activity, by the volcano. Well, the volcano itself is inactive, but as I say, it's the ground is still very, very hot underneath. And so you get a chance to sample this dish called cozido. I always say to people in advance, it is not the most flavorful thing that you've ever had. It's the novelty of having food that's been cooked in the ground. That's what makes it particularly special. There are other dishes to try, but nevertheless, you can't visit the Azores without trying cozido. You'll have a chance to hop in a thermal bath at Poco de Dona Beja, and then you'll have some time back at the hotel to enjoy and do some exploration of the area on your own. We'll also have a sightseeing tour taking in the whole scenic east coast of the island, an area called Nordeste. And just want to make sure I got this. Yeah, Nordeste, are otherwise meaning northeast. And this is where, as I mentioned before, there are scenic outlooks at practically every corner. But from my perspective, the northeast is among the most scenic views in the island. And we'll spend the whole day. We'll look at the waterfall at Voida Nova. We'll visit a tea plantation. In fact, the only tea plantation in continental Europe. Well, it's actually not continental Europe since we're on the islands, but within and we'll hear about production of tea in this unique climate of the Azores. So there's a whole bunch of amazing scenes. Again, I don't have enough pictures to, well, I do, but we'd have to spend 2 hours looking at slideshow of pictures of the Azores that really capture the beauty of this incredible island. We will then depart after 3 nights to go back to the other side of the island, back to Ponta Delgada, the capital, and on the way, we're going to visit Pico de Barrosa, which is a beautiful crater lake that you see here in the center of the island, Lake Fogo, and has one of the best viewpoints because you can see both sides of the island. You see the cobalt blue Atlantic Ocean all around you, and then the distinctive color of the crater lake in the basin below. And so many beautiful sights that we'll see as we make our way around the island. We'll visit the Ribera Grande, where they make local liquor. We'll visit a pineapple plantation that they have on the islands. Again, it's kind of like, even though the latitude is not that far off of what we have in southern Ontario at home, but because of the Gulf Stream that keeps the islands very mild all year round. I've been there in November and it's been 20 degrees and you can swim in the sea. That enables them to have a very unique climate and produce all kinds of vegetables and fruits that you wouldn't otherwise imagine. So we'll get a sampling of some of that as we make our way around the island. We're going to stay right in the heart of Ponta Delgado at the Marina Atlantico, where some of the rooms look out over the marina. Here you get a great shot of it, and so some lovely evening sunsets. And right across the street from the Marina Atlantico, you can't quite see it in this picture, but there is the sea baths. So you can actually go swimming in the Atlantic Ocean. And the beautiful thing is that, again, as I mentioned, because the Gulf Stream keeps the climate warm, you can swim in here actually all year round. The temperature of the water doesn't really get that cold. I mean, that all depends on what your definition of cold is, but certainly sort of you could expect between 15 and 22 degrees is what the Atlantic Ocean is typically like. So I always say it's worth it. Give yourself the chance to swim in the Atlantic Ocean because we don't always have that opportunity, since our East Coast can be very, very chilly in comparison to the Azores. So the Marina Atlantico, again, a very cozy hotel with views out over the marina. And then, weather permitting, we'll have a chance to go whale watching because the waters around the Azores are absolutely abundant in marine life. You're never, of course, with any wildlife adventure, you're never too sure what you're going to get or if you're going to get anything. But they have an interesting practice in the Azores, is that they have these observers that go up into the hills, and you can see faded in the background here. Of course, you have the volcanic mountains of São Miguel, and they have the observers that go to the hills and sit at observation points where they can look out over the sea, and they can see from a distance where the whales are. They use long-range binoculars or telescopes to spot for the spouts of the whales, and then they can triangulate the position and then communicate that out to the sightseeing boats. And so, if whale watching in the Azores, you have very high chance of success that you're going to be able to see whales. And again, weather permitting, I think it's important to note as well, this is the Atlantic Ocean. Even on a calm day, you have some swell. So you just have to take that into account. But I know that our members have again reported some wonderful experiences out on the waters around São Miguel. And then that will wrap up our trip. So 2 weeks of some of the best of what Portugal has to offer, and will culminate with a flight home. As I say, you can fly directly from the Azores back to Toronto on SATA Airlines. So that makes it very, very convenient. And they, I think, cooperate with WestJet to provide connections to other parts of Canada. So all of the information on this program is available in the detailed program itinerary, that if you haven't already seen a copy of it, we will send you that with the webinar replay within the next 24 hours or so. But here are the dates and prices in Canadian dollars for our program for next year. Pretty much all of our land is in everything mentioned on this trip, your hotel accommodation, breakfast every day, lunches or dinners, sightseeing, admissions, wine tasting, lunches, all that stuff is part of the program. And it also includes your one-way flight between Porto and the Azores. So all you have to take care of is what we call an open jaw ticket from Canada to Porto and then returning from the Azores. Of late, the airfares have been not too bad to this destination. So we're happy to give you information on that if you're interested to join us on this trip. So yeah, the only thing that you have to look after, of course, is your airfare and trip cancellation insurance. That's all that you need to think about in terms of budgeting for this trip. If you sign up early, if you sign up for the April trip before the end of August, or for the September trip before the end of November of this year, we are able to secure a bit better deal with the hotel. So we pass that on to you, and you get a couple of $100 off on that. So time to answer any questions that you might have, but of course you may have questions specific to your own situation, particularly if you're thinking about joining us for this trip. In order to ask those questions, you can either drop an email to Paula or give us a call at the line there, at Paula's direct line noted on here. And in the meantime, I think a few questions have come in, Paula, so let's try and get those answered.
Sounds good. I have a member that's asking about the activity level. I know you've mentioned, Porto's areas are, lend themselves to walking around. Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of what degree of activity we have
for sure
included?
This is not an overly strenuous tour, so but it is moderately strenuous, and we have a guideline on this trip which applies to pretty much all of our trips, which is that you need to be able to walk a minimum of 10,000 steps a day, which is kind of what everybody recommends in this day and age, that you have to be able to walk a mile, so that's 1.6 kilometers in about 20 to 25 minutes, so which is a reasonably but not too fast pace. It's no more than that is required, but that is the benchmark, because Porto, as an example, is really only you can really only see the city on foot, because there's so many narrow alleys and places where vehicles simply can't go. Similarly, in the Azores, we're not doing any big hikes. Certainly for those that wish, there is time when we're in Furnas to go the afternoon after we go around the lake. And we're not going super far, but that is pretty much the benchmark in terms of the strenuous of the trip.
Perfect. Another question I had come in was with regards to the free time that we include in free and meals at leisure. Do we provide options for members on those with their leisure time?
Yes. Well, I mean, so what we do with the free time is, first and foremost, we encourage members to do a little bit of research on their own, because everybody's different in terms of how they like to spend their time. So we can sort of give you a few ideas. Our local guide and the host will, as you're going around touring, for example, Porto, which is where you have a full free day on the third day of the trip. And they'll sort of say, well, you might want to, visit this museum or go and see these churches or go to this part of a town. That will be about it. But as we say in all of our documentation, it is really, really worth it to do a little poking around, a little web surfing, as they say, to find out what's best for you. But we'll provide a few tips and a few ideas. Certainly, that's what our local guides are there to do.
Yeah, I think with everyone has such unique interests that it's good to do a little bit of looking into what you specifically might want to do, and by all means ask our hosts and guides, and they can help as well. Perfect. You chatted a fair bit about flights, and I have a member asking if we book flights for them. Can you want to elaborate on that, or do you want me to answer it?
Yeah, sure. Well, Paula, you can mention exactly how we manage flights, because since you've had to field those questions firsthand.
Sounds good. So we work with, we recommend another company, and upon the trip being deemed to go, we provide you with a form to fill in with all your preferences, and then they'll do the research and provide you a detailed quote with the flight options, because they are different depending on where you're coming from in Canada. It also provides you complete flexibility if you want to stop over somewhere en route, on either end, and really get the best option possible. So we don't do them in-house. We can give you some direction. And I think prices here have stayed relatively good, because SATA's come back, another airline has come back online that like wasn't offering flights up until a year or so ago. They had kind of scaled
Exactly.
back.
So
So
a lot of airlines scaled back during the pandemic, and so yeah, there's thankfully transatlantic airfare is sort of normalized in terms of airfares. So it's always better. Usually we have a pretty good idea of how many people are going to join the trip by at least 6 months out. That's the optimal time to be looking at booking airfare for a trip like this. I know the question of whether was not. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. Actually, sorry, that was another question that came in. I just was looking through a couple others here. Someone was asking if what we recommend between the two different times of year that we're offering the trip.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's a good question. It's like, when is your travel calendar enable you to go? Honestly, weather-wise, the either spring or fall, both times of the year are very, very similar in terms of what you can expect with temperature. So in Porto and in the Douro Valley, whether it's May, whether it's September, you're looking at typically temperatures in the low 20s. It doesn't usually get a lot warmer than that. Mind you, stranger things have happened in this era of climate change. It can be a little bit cooler at night, but it's really quite optimal. Once you get inland, it is a couple of degrees cooler than it is on the coast, but generally May and September are quite comfortable. You can get some rain here and there, as you can get anytime. With regards to the Azores, again, this is a typical Atlantic maritime climate. It's mild all year round. It never really gets hot. But it never really gets that, it doesn't get that cold either. So once again, you're talking about temperatures from the high teens and the low 20s, and a little bit cooler in the evening. Rain can be anytime, but the beautiful thing about the Azores is that any Azorean will tell you, if you don't like the weather, wait 30 minutes, because it changes very quickly there, because weather systems tend to pass through very quickly across the Atlantic.
Perfect. I always love to. We have a couple of members that have been on the trip before that are with us that like to just relive, I think, the memories by joining us. So Ingrid provided a couple of pointers. She said she absolutely loved the trip last year, and loved the night swimming in Furnace, and to maybe bring an older bathing suit for the hot pools, which is yeah, that applies in a few different places with natural hot springs if you don't want to use your favorite one, but
absolutely. And we as our members know that have been on our trips, is we do a detailed pre-trip webinar and give you lots of information on how to prepare for this trip in the best way possible. Okay.
Perfect. I don't have any other questions that have come in to me.
Fantastic. Well, if you do have another question, please, by all means, drop us an email, give us a call. We're always here for you, and we would be delighted to have you on with us to Porto and the Azores. Yeah, please consider joining us for next year. This is actually our last live in-person webinar for a couple of months. We are taking we're still going to be doing webinars, but they're going to be all recorded, because just of logistics for the next couple of months, and also because we thought, well, it's summertime and not everybody wants to necessarily be committed to being in front of their computer screen at 11 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. So we're going to be recording our webinars so that you can view them at any time, and obviously ask questions by email as before. So we'd love your feedback about that. The first one will be our Palaces of India program that's going to be released in the newsletter this weekend. In fact, I'm just going to be recording that webinar shortly. So I'm dying to hear from you what you think about our pre-recorded webinars, how that works for you, because of course we want to do everything in the best interest of our members. All good?
Yes, Gordon, I popped you a
yes.
message there. I don't know if you want
Yes,
to
you did. I
mention
see that.
those.
About the summer social events. Yes, one last thing before we go. We are finally going to be doing our summer social events again. We haven't run an event since before the pandemic. So we finally, because I'm going to be spending a bit of time in Canada this summer, we're going to be running events for our members to get together with each other, and with myself and Amber, and Paula will be at our event in Ottawa as well, and we'll have various hosts and people at our different events near Victoria, on Vancouver Island, in Vancouver, in Saskatoon, Ottawa, and Toronto. Look for the event dates. I see that some have gotten their tickets already. Toronto is actually already half sold out. So if you're thinking about joining us in Toronto, probably better to get your tickets sooner than later. We still have space in the other ones. Well, we have space in all of them so far. But we'd love to see you. I'd love to meet you in person if we haven't met before, and I'd love to see you again if we have traveled before. Thanks again for joining us today, everybody. And as I say, we won't be doing this live for a while, but I promise we'll stay in touch and we'll stay connected. And we'll, in the meantime, have yourselves a great summer and a great rest of the day. Bye-bye for now.